today's meetup series. Just a quick reminder about today's topic. It will be anchor institutions. And as I have seen, many of you think that education is one of the biggest challenges in Georgia in terms of startups. So anchor institutions is about universities. They are trying to innovate. You know that many innovations come via big universities, at least from USA, like MIT, Caltech. We are doing our part as well in Georgia, and today's topic will be about how this innovation could be translated into startups and what role does it have in our ecosystem. And I hope you will find it very interesting, and I hope it will give you some very valuable insights. Let's start with the video, as usual, and then proceed with the presentation.
Welcome back to Beyond Silicon Valley. I'm Michael Goldberg. In previous lectures, we've discussed government support for entrepreneurship, the role of philanthropy, and intermediary organizations. This week, we'll explore ways to leverage anchor institutions. Some key points you'll learn about are supporting increased commercialization activity, licensing versus new company formation, and measuring success. Cleveland, like many communities around the world, is fortunate to have outstanding research institutions, including universities and hospitals. My home university, Case Western Reserve, attracts over $400 million each year in research funding. And the region is also home to several other strong research universities, such as Cleveland State, the University of Akron, and Kent State, just to name a few. The Cleveland Clinic is the #1 ranked hospital in the world for cardiovascular disease, and University Hospitals is another leading healthcare provider in our region. 10 years ago, Cleveland's anchor institutions were struggling to translate their research into commercially viable technologies or companies. There was not a culture of entrepreneurship, nor was there a vibrant ecosystem for creating, promoting, or nurturing innovation. Institutions were focused on licensing their technologies to large corporations, typically outside the region, rather than creating local startup companies. New initiatives funded by the Third Frontier and donors focused on strengthening the commercialization process at key institutions. As a result, the pace of new company formation increased. In this lecture, we will discuss how communities can work with their anchor institutions to link their engines of innovation, such as universities, to a connected web of support that includes entrepreneurs, investors, and talent. The combination of political will, a long view, and investment capital can improve the pipeline of startup companies. Dave Neuendorfer is the CEO of Linestream Technologies.
Linestream Technologies is an embedded software company, and we are changing the way that automated products are controlled by delivering easy-to-use software that delivers advanced performance.
Linestream's technology was buried in a research lab for 12 years until a venture capitalist, backed with investment capital from the state of Ohio and several foundations, provided the resources, mentoring, and management talent to turn it into a standalone startup company.
Linestream spun out of Cleveland State University in 2008. I believe we were, if not the first, one of the first spin-out companies that they had. And the catalyst for the spin-out was actually a business planning competition, where the professor, Dr. Gurjan Gao, who had been leading about 10 to 12 years of research in this space, put together a presentation to show how his technology could apply to industry and how they could potentially build a business around it. And our current investors happen to be in the audience for that meeting. The stars aligned. They were able to meet and discuss the blueprint for taking it out of the research realm at CSU and getting it on the path towards commercialization.
For decades, it was well understood that universities and hospitals were developing innovative ideas and cutting-edge research, but turning this into a pipeline of independent, high-growth companies was a struggle. Frank Samuel, the state of Ohio's former science and technology advisor, explains why the Third Frontier focused on this opportunity.
Well, the institutions are important for two reasons. One is that they create intellectual property through their research, and they are the source of highly qualified individuals, often young individuals, who can contribute to entrepreneurial enterprise.
Jackie Atcho, then a McKinsey partner working on the regional strategy to support entrepreneurship, recalls why their recommendations pushed for Cleveland to try to take better advantage of this university.
We really wanted to create a pathway through which technological ideas coming out of universities or from people in businesses who wanted to go off on their own could find a market and a place to get capital and some support to be able to start their company and grow it.
Baiju Shah, former CEO of BioEnterprise, argues that in the past, the region had not appropriately invested in the commercialization of technology out of the institution.
One of the clear strengths that we had probably underinvested in from an economic development perspective was our region's great clinical and research institutions in healthcare. We are known in the United States for our clinical institutions. They're considered to be among the best in the country. We've got a great research university that has a whole host of research. But in spite of that, unlike, again, other regions where similar ingredients existed, we hadn't seen the growth of our healthcare economy, the products and services that supply those types of institutions and ultimately supply institutions across the country and in the world.
Why were Cleveland's leading institutions struggling to turn their research into a new company? Stephen Gerard was formerly a vice president of Johnson & Johnson's Corporate Office of Science and Technology.
Why don't universities do a great job of commercializing technology? It's really not their expertise. They're great at educating, they're great at publishing papers and writing grants and getting basic research funded, but they really are not good at design and wrapping business models around designs that will be successful in the real world.
An example of Cleveland's attempt to change the velocity of commercialization activity coming out of the institutions was the creation of the Global Cardiovascular Innovation Center, or GCIC, housed at the Cleveland Clinic. The GCIC was funded by a grant from the Third Frontier, matched with investment from institution partners, including the Cleveland Clinic. Mark Loeb, GCIC's executive director, provides an overview.
To step back a minute, GCIC was formed with a very generous $60 million grant from the state of Ohio to establish the organization. And of that, roughly half is dedicated to, in turn, provide support to new technology development and new company formation.
Charu Ramanathan's Cardio Insight, whose technology was developed at a lab at Case Western Reserve University, was one of the companies that benefited from GCIC's grant.
Another vehicle that we use state-funded money is GCIC. So the GCIC and the Cleveland Clinic Foundation, it was right on because we're cardiovascular and innovative technology. So we actually developed 3 different clinical applications in heart failure, in catheter navigations and knowing the location of the catheter, which is a very important clinical impact, as well as building our first commercial software. All of these 3 key aspects of the product were developed with money invested through the GCIC.
Although some startup companies grab the headlines for how quickly they're able to scale and grow, most early-stage companies, particularly those in the medical industry, take many years to develop. Mark Lowe argues that the grants that the GCIC provides help companies like Cardio Insight survive until private funding is secured.
So the financing continuum or resources for any particular technology has become a multi-step, multi-source process that spans a development timeline in biomedical products of anywhere from 3 to 5 to 10 years. So it's a long process, requires significant amounts of funding and a continuum of availability of that funding to move the products forward. Well, that leaves the very early stage technologies without much support.
Joe Jankowski, Case Western Reserve's Chief Innovation Officer, describes why he believes that Cardio Insight made investment sense as a spin-off company.
Cardio Insight was really a technology that had existed at Case for almost a decade prior to the company being created. And the company was created by 2 students who were still working on their PhDs in the lab of the original inventor and realized that there was value here. The thing that made it easy to consider it a local spin-off was 2 factors. One is it couldn't go to a large company. The Medtronics or Johnson & Johnson's, it was too early. There was too much technical risk. So it wasn't as though we had a tough choice to make. The second reason was because it's early stage development, commercial development would need to be in the field of what we call clinical translation, getting that sort of first-in-man studies return. We have one of the world's great cardiology sectors here in Cleveland.
Since private companies such as Johnson & Johnson tend to only invest in companies that are more well-established, Steve Gerard sees the importance of government programs like the Third Frontier filling the early-stage capital gap.
So the Third Frontier and programs like it I think are really important. They're organized in a way that can really make an impact. First of all, they're substantial in terms of their size, the total magnitude, financial resources put behind that program can make a difference. They're also have a long view, which I think is really critical for programs like this.
Bruce Katz at the Brookings Institution believes that Northeast Ohio has acted wisely by trying to leverage the strength of its innovative institution.
So Northeast Ohio is really fortunate to have this network of advanced research institutions, medical campuses that are really at the cutting edge of innovation. They're service institutions, right? They're teaching the next generation of workers, students, leaders. They're providing health care, but they're also very innovative, right? They're the next stage of biomed, cracking the code, a wide range of diseases. And that plays itself out into the private sector as we commercialize innovation.
Brad Whitehead of the Fund for Our Economic Future concurs with Katz about trying to harness the innovation of anchor institutions to boost entrepreneurship.
Anchor institutions sit at the foundation of most economic development strategies of regions around the country and frankly around the world. Part of the kind of well-recognized reason for that is because they're a source of ideas, a source of talent, a source of innovation, and so forth. One of the, I think, unsung roles that our anchor institutions in Northeast Ohio have played is it's provided us the foundation for which we can also serve the rest of the region.
Communities outside the U.S. face many of the same challenges we have heard about in Cleveland regarding how to commercialize research from their leading institutions. Chris Zobrist is a professor at the Vietnam National University.
Until now, I think most government research institutes haven't had that much interaction in terms of Congress. I think most of the research so far that's come out of them has been largely driven by government initiatives and whatever the professors in the universities could get government sponsorship for. And typically it wasn't that market oriented.
Yi Zhang is a venture capitalist with Kaiwu Capital in China.
Compared to the university in the US, they're still not very good at converting R&D into real commercial available products. I know recently they've been spending lots of effort in directing every university has a patent office and help them hack the IP and also give them specific instructions on how you can commercialize this product.
In Cleveland and other communities around the world, anchor institutions are trying to translate their research strengths into commercially viable entities. Ultimately, the private market determines the commercial success of a technology. The ability of companies like CardioInsight and Limestream Technologies to raise private venture capital financing validates the initial investment by government and donors in the commercialization process. As with other forms of early-stage investment, the final measurement of success and support will be determined over the long term. With the necessary support, anchor institutions are showing the ability to leverage their ideas and talent instead of letting them gather dust in labs. Success is measured in terms of the number of startup companies launched, the amount of outside private capital raised, the creation of good local jobs, and ultimately revenue back to the institution after an exit event or through licensing. That's it for this lecture of Beyond Silicon Valley. In the next lecture, we'll focus on the emergence of seed accelerators and how government and donor support is fueling their growth and transitioning economy. See you next time.
So I want to emphasize one more thing that is almost in every video, that success is not measured not only by IPO or how much money you would get in investment, but also creating local jobs. So social responsibility is one of the major and interesting things that is interesting for investors, and maybe not directly for every investor, but for government especially. So today's presentation will be about TCO, Technology Commercialization Office, and I will let David do his presentations, and of course questions will be later.
Hello, my name is David. I'm here, I represent Tech Transfer Office at Ilya State University. Tech Transfer Office was created about a year and a half ago from a grant by CRDF, GRDF, and there are 4 of us. I am marketing and business development specialist, and I'm going to tell you today about technology commercialization process. Why do we need technology commercialization? What are the milestones? What are the problems? And I'm going to tell you what we are doing to overcome the problems and what problems we are facing specifically here in Georgia. So, what are the objectives of technology commercialization? Why are we doing it? There are several. The first one is nurture the culture of commercialization. A couple of, I think about 20, 30 years ago, this process started in the United States. So it's relatively new. And the idea was to speed up the process of commercialization of technology, because the funds from government were determined to be spent inefficiently in institutions. The second one is to increase income sources of universities. Extra income from licensing and from commercialization, from creating startups, spin-offs is a nice income. Attract more R&D funds. The more you commercialize technology, the easier it is to attract R&D funds in the future, either from a government or from industry. And the eventual goal is to become a world-class R&D institution. And one of the important goals, important objectives is it encourages regional growth, economic growth. So the more startups a university creates, the more startups you contribute to ecosystem of your city or region. There are some individual rewards as well. It helps the university to retain top scientists. The more commercialization rate you have, the better you attract the top scientists. Here is on this chart, you see the classical role of Technology Commercialization Office. It was always, in the past, it was sitting on the top of applied research, and it's natural, because in applied research, what is easiest to commercialize. It rarely touched the basic and fundamental science. And it was sitting between the companies, the licensees, and the researchers to fill the gap between these two. Lately, we see that it's changing. The Tech Transfer Office grows both sides. It comes closer to basic science, basic research, and also comes closer to the field that it didn't touch before, and namely product development, incubation, acceleration. So basically, it does more to translate science into applied science, and it also does more to start an acceleration in incubation services for companies. So it becomes, instead of a tech transfer office, it becomes a value creation center, because it adds more value to the process. It creates an innovation culture, it recruits diversified talent, because in order to manage the spin-offs, you need to recruit the talent, and talent needs to have business skills, not only technical skills. So what's a typical commercialization process? There is a technology. You first have a commercialization committee which looks at technology and determines whether it's licensable or not. If it's a licensable technology, meaning that there is a demand in the marketplace for this technology, then the technology goes out and follows goes to a licensing committee. And then licensing committee decides whether it should pursue active licensing or passive licensing. The difference between two is passive licensing is more, when active licensing is when you see the technology is in high demand. For example, virtual reality, augmented reality, right? It's in a high demand now, and you have technology that can be applied there, then you do active steps with it. Passive is technology when it's, it could be applied, but probably not, it's not hot now, so you don't spend too much on marketing. Now, if you determine that the technology is not licensable yet, there are two steps that you can do. That you incubate, the technology is not ready, so you incubate, you put it inside, you dedicate a team of people that work on technology and make it make it commercializable. And so basically it's a candidate for spin-off, right? Spin-off means that when you form a company and it's a spin-off, it becomes a startup. Now you can decide that it's ready to be a spin-off immediately, or you need to incubate and make technology more mature and then decide whether to make it spin-off or license it. This is a pretty easy chart. There's nothing more to commercialization. So now how it works. Now what are the steps? The first step is you assess the commercial potential of the technology. You do patent research and you do market opportunity research of the technology. I'm going to talk about in more details later about this. Then the next step is business development. Then mainly you need it on an incubation stage. Business development includes the patent, protecting it, funding, searching for funding, creating business plan, and marketing. And then the last is establish strategy, whether you're going to incubate, license, or spin-off. There are 4 steps in assessment. On the first step on assessment, you have 4 levels. You have intellectual property, you have technology, you have market, you have team. You need to assess all 4. So what are the issues there? Intellectual property. Why do we need intellectual property for a technology? Anyone?
To defend what you have achieved, what you have been working so hard for many years maybe, so you don't want anyone else to use your intellectual property and gain some money from it.
Exactly. So in other words, to gain competitive advantage, sustainable, unfair competitive advantage, right? Unfair. So basically it gives you 20 years where no one else can compete with you with the same technology. It gives you protection. That's what government designed to encourage innovation. So you need to look at it whether the technology is patentable. So you need to look whether it's a novelty and wasn't published before. That's a big problem, by the way. Many people don't know that whether if they publish something already, probably it's not patentable. It's difficult to defend it, and it has to be non-obvious. Typical patent costs there are several layers. In a provisional patent, it's designed that you file the provisional patent and you have 1 year to decide whether you want to pursue or not. So you have 1 year for business development activities to decide whether you need to do something else or not. Typically it costs about $4,000. Then PCT, 18 months. You file the patents after that, and then it's approximately $10,000-12,000. And then altogether with office actions and issuance, typically it's more than $50,000 US.
Are these timelines and cost estimates based on Georgia? Or?
No, these are worldwide. Based on USPTO.
US.
Yeah. Not including lawyers' fees. Sometimes lawyers' fees can be big. The next step is technology. So you need to assess the technology. Will it work? Is scientific basis understood? Is the technology well developed? And most importantly, if the team has a product development capabilities. And if not, then you probably need to incubate it. You need to add people who have product development capabilities. Then the next one, you need to look at the market. This is very important, whether there is a market need for the technology, whether the need is well defined, and the product that can be created from this technology addresses that need. The market needs to be large. Doesn't need to exist today, so maybe market doesn't exist today, but will exist in the future, will be large. If the market is not large enough, then you don't have a startup. Then you have another lifestyle business, which we are not discussing today, that can be something else. Nothing wrong with it, but it's more of a small or medium enterprise, not a startup. You need to look at competition, and if the barriers of your entry are low or high, because this will determine the cost. You also need to look at the time to market. How long will it take for you to come up with a product to launch in the market? And you also need to look at the potential profit margins from the product. The next, team. Team is typically the most important thing. For startups here it's a little different, because typically when you're dealing with university team, the team is going to be weak. From a research point, from technical point, it's going to be strong, but from a market skills, it's going to be weak. So it will be your job to incubate it and create a better team. So you need to look at if team has a product development capabilities, if team has time and willing to support, if team has realistic expectations. That's the #1 problem in our reality, and if team has commercialization experience, which is probably none with people that come to us. And then you look at your commercialization options. As I noticed before, you need to understand the strengths and weaknesses of the technology, and then only then you need to determine whether the technology goes through licensing or spin-off, 2 ways. Is technology mature enough? Does it require incubation? Those are the questions that we need to be answering. The easiest path is licensing. So if you determine the technology is ready to be licensed, then you look for a company to sell that license to. Typically, the company pays royalties. Royalties are something from 1 to 5% of sales that come from the product based on the technology. Typically also it includes the repayment of patent costs, so the company reimburses the patent costs. And if the license is exclusive, there are 2 types of licenses. Exclusive means that only this company can use this patent can be a certain number of years or forever. Or license can be non-exclusive, meaning that other company also can patent the same technology. Naturally, exclusive license is more expensive than non-exclusive, and there are different milestones and development milestones. So this chart we already looked at. It's a part of the bigger chart. So basically, the licensing is, if you determine that it's a licensing, you need to determine whether it requires active licensing or passive licensing. Active requires some marketing, passive doesn't. Then the next step is spin-off. If you decide that technology is not ready for licensing, the first, or it's too good to be licensed, meaning that if you form a startup, the startup has a potential to be big, to be a unicorn, and you make more money, you commercialize it more than just simply from licensing. So then if that one of these is true, then you decide to open the new company. Startup is created to either develop the technology or at some point develop this till the technology is ready for licensing and then license to industry. Typically, a key researcher will be acting as a head of R&D or CTO, and then you need to put together a small but very efficient development team that will work on a product development. I'm going to skip that. The way that you look at it, at the licensing considerations are, how do you find a good licensing fit, right? How do you find a company that is good licensee potential? Whether the company can leverage the development and sales and marketing. So you need an established company, and if the technology is an add-on already to the technology that company has. So if the company will benefit from this technology. And another thing is whether this company is willing to pass control of your technology. Spin-off considerations, there are several. The first can be a lack of suitable licensee. So technology is not mature enough, one way, so there are no good candidates for license, or technology has high potential and you don't want it to license yet at this point. So you believe that you can advance technologies and better than another company, it has a potential to be unicorn, and it has a good team. Formation of a startup team, that in case when you incubate, so basically you manage a small portfolio of opportunities into startups. You have to put the commercial business development and strategy into place. You need to coordinate the R&D, venture planning, attracting funds, market research, and commercial development. So all the business hiring new staff and venture financing includes that. Some of the considerations for internal incubations, whether if technology is not mature enough to be ready for commercialization, you need to put it in incubation mode. If the target market is yet unclear, but you are not sure, then it makes sense to put it in incubation mode. If it's difficult to find potential investors for a spin-off, you put it in incubation mode. You need to protect first the IP, you also put it in incubation form. Some of the common problems that we face and others face the same problems. Overestimating the technology. It's natural, right? Engineers and R&D people tend to overestimate the technology. They think that technology is the key, not the commercialization is more important. Second problem, patents rejected. Happens, right? You couldn't find something from the beginning and then the letter comes from the USPTO, your patents are rejected. Researchers don't invest time that it requires. It requires, even writing patents takes a lot of time from a researcher. Researchers lose interest over time, happens very often. The researchers, they like new things, right? If something is repetitive, they tend to lose interest. Poor understanding of the customer, that's also typical for R&D, and disconnect between business and science. On one side, business needs to understand that IP requires time and investment because before it's ready toward the market. And they also need to understand that researchers typically want the freedom of research and control over their IP. And also researchers need to publish results at some point. And researchers, on the other hand, they fail to understand that not technology, but customer is the most important. If you don't create something that customer wants, you have a problem. And they also need to understand that very often significant funds need to be raised to push this technology further. And the company needs to operate at I would say, 100 times at accelerated pace that typically R&D or academia works, especially startups. So here's a chart that shows where university focuses on a basic research, the technology commercialization focus is on a proof of concept, commercial prototype, beta testing, and this is the last one is an already established company. Some of the success factors that help commercialization of technology is focus, concentrate, because typically what you have is you have lack of resources. So you need to concentrate on a few selected areas to be able to achieve success. You need to identify innovation which is connected to market needs, not to something that is not clear. The criteria of selection should include commercializable, capable, and competitive. You also need to create the infrastructure for incubation, and the infrastructure includes mentors, business development people, product development people, something that academia typically lacks. So you need to use the business. Luckily, we have a good business school at Ilya State University, so we can use business students. And you need to pursue an aggressive IP strategy. These are some of the facts and numbers for comparison. The numbers don't look good in our case, not at UCLA, but in Ilya State, because this is commercialization, something new. It doesn't look good even in terms of startups. If you look generally at Georgia, we're just starting. But look at UCLA. 406 new inventions disclosed in 2014. These are numbers from 2 years below. 82 new inventions patented. 23 million, almost 24 million licensing revenue. And this is UCLA share. Doesn't include the researchers. 231 industry-sponsored research, 852 total active patents, US patents, been created. I think the UCLA Tech Transfer Office existed for, I think, 30 years or something like that. And 2,083 active inventions. At MIT has 63 entrepreneurship courses. For comparison, India State has one, only the second one added. 172 serial entrepreneurs are faculty members at MIT, and 30,000 active companies were launched by MIT alumni. These are typical, companies that some of you might recognize, some of you might not, but these are the companies that were started by MIT students. The most famous probably are Dropbox, Akamai, some others are just, mostly are tech companies. These are notable companies started by MIT professors. Gobi, Streambase, Tillera, Tokotech, Vertica, Datex, and Sun Catalyst. And the last chart that I want to show you to kind of see, show you where we are. I don't know if you see it from there, but this chart, I pulled it from a World Bank report on Georgia, and there is only one item here where we are doing well, and the item is called Government Procurement of Advanced Tech Products. So government is very good at using advanced tech products. On all others, we are significantly lower than world average. And other items include availability of scientists and engineers, university-industry collaboration in R&D, company spending on R&D, significantly lower, quality of scientific research institution, capacities for innovation. We're lower than world average, so there is a big room for us to improve, and considering that we started pretty recently, we have a lot of work to do. That's it, my presentation. I will be happy to answer your questions. My position answering your questions and participating in your workshop will be twofold. I'm also a serial entrepreneur. I founded 5 startups, and I can talk from my expertise, from the experience, and also from a tech transfer point of India State University. So you can look at both points when asking your questions. Thank you. Sure. It's okay to answer this? It's not related to this, but that's okay.
I think that, I suppose that not many are from university, they are going to pursue university R&D, so maybe we can use this time to answer their questions as well. Okay. Because it's very rare to find a guy like David. He's a unicorn for us, for Georgia, so I hope you can use his resources. But also, please take into consideration that his resources are limited as well.
Briefly about my experience. I was born here in Georgia. I graduated from the faculty of, it was called back then Cybernetics and Applied Mathematics, which is computer science department basically now, from Tbilisi State University. I graduated in 1990. I was working at 5 jobs after I graduated, doing some programming for TBC group, for store, for shops, and working on my dissertation, for a PhD dissertation in artificial intelligence. That was 90s, tough time, if you know. My total income was about, $150 a month or something, which was good income back then. And about in 1995, I came to the US. I went to work on my business degree, on MBA, in University of Minnesota. Took 2 years, I graduated, and then I worked for about a year and a half at big companies, Deloitte and Touche, MicroAge, and that was it. I figured out it wasn't for me, and then since then I'm in a startup business. So what are my 5 startups? Silicon Valley, not exactly. Technically, I was never based in Silicon Valley. I was based in Washington, D.C. areas and San Diego and LA. I was commuting a lot, especially from LA and San Diego. It's easy commute, 1 hour on the southwest. But I was not based in Silicon Valley, technically. Now, my startups, the first one was a software startup, the only software startup that I had. The software, we had a knowledge management and big data with artificial intelligence software. The way that it started up ended, well, it didn't end, it still exists, but it's kind of it didn't turn out to be a real startup. We had a couple of clients, big clients, ExxonMobil, it was the largest company back then, so it was a multi-million-dollar contract with ExxonMobil and Procter & Gamble, a couple of big clients, and that's it. At one point it stopped being interesting because it was software that we were writing basically for this company. The intention was not that. The intention was my initial intention was create a software that would be universally used. So this was kind of, for startups, it's a failure. The second startup was we made a 3D monitor for gamers. So the monitor looked like a normal monitor, but it was 3D. It had 2 panels. And by putting like sunglasses, light glasses, you could play a game in 3D. That also turned out to be a failure because we were earlier. Timing is important for startups. We were early in the market. The 3D wasn't hot back then. It was 5 years before the craze of 3D started, which was in 2009, 2010. So we attracted funding. We went into retail. There was a little crisis there, and the startup basically, we sold it to Siemens. We sold the technology, not the startup. And Siemens to this day uses the technology in their echoscope, the 3D echoscopes. So it was also a failure. We sold, not for a big amount of money. So we recovered some of the investment that we made, but it still wasn't a success. The third startup was a 3D company called Expand. It exists till today. It's not startup anymore, it's established company. We were the first company, we had another competitor, RealD. So we're 2 companies that started the 3D wave, which we started in 2009 with Disney announced Chicken Little then Avatar came, then all manufacturers came with 3D TVs and 3D projectors. So basically we manufacture all, except Samsung and LG, all the big TV manufacturers use our glasses. So it's either co-branded glasses, Expand and Sony, for example, Expand and JVC, or branded, with a customer, and there is a small serial number there. It says that it's manufactured by Expand. We have a division that serves cinema. So if you go to cinema to see a 3D movie, most likely that you are watching the movie using our technology, especially if the glasses are red. Red glasses used to be our signature, not anymore. There are black also available, but red was that's how we started. So we have a cinema division, we have a consumer division, we have a professional division, which includes also education. So we sell the 3D systems into schools. And there was a study that was done by Texas Instruments that 3D, if people are looking in 3D for educational content, their test scores go up 30%, which was a big catalyst for the education industry. And in the US and Europe and South America, Latin America, the schools started to, the test scores actually are a big thing for schools. They're doing hard to increase their scores because their funding depends on that. So that's a startup which exists till today. The next one, the number 4 startup, is we did this in partnership with other people. It's called, well, the product it's 3Doodler. And if you Google the 3Doodler, it's a pen, 3D pen, so you can draw models in the air. So instead of like drawing with a pen on a 2D, you draw in the air. So it works like a 3D printer. It uses the same material, filler or ABS. So you put the straws, little straws of plastic into a pen. When you make the moves, the plastic gets heated and then it dries. So that's a product. We had we put it on a Kickstarter. Our intent was to raise $100,000. We ended up raising $2 million. We got lucky because the staff on a Kickstarter, typically the staff goes and looks for interesting things, and this turned out to be interesting. I don't understand why it was interesting, and I don't even understand, when I do the speeches here, people remember me by 3D Doodler, although 3D Doodler is like one of the products, not even an important one, it's a toy. But people like it because, it's it's sketchy, it's 3D printed, right? Right. So the staff liked it, they put it on the top page, and TechCrunch also wrote an article, and that is a success right there, because when staff put it on the top page and TechCrunch rates it, then everyone goes in there and puts their money. We also did a Kickstarter campaign for a second version. The first pen was like this thick. Considering that it was designed for kids, it wasn't easy to use. And the second one looks like a normal pen, so it's more easy to use. We have now the version for, we just released a couple of weeks ago, the version for small kids. The first one is, it has certain heat, and by regulations, the kids under 12 years, they cannot use it. So we released a version for small kids that is not heated. And then our plans are, in 4 months, we're releasing the version for professionals. Professionals meaning the not serious version, but if an interior designer or architect is on a plane or in a bus and he has an idea, instead of drawing on a paper, he can draw in the air and make a 3-dimensional model of what he's trying to achieve. And the newest one is VR, the New Ion, the company called New Ion. And VR is very close to 3D. So it will be, for us, it will be, especially considering the 3D market is matured and now is like flat, isn't growing, we needed something new. And VR is the same as 3D. VR is 3D basically with positional tracking. So you use the same content, you just add positional tracking cameras. So we are working on an HMD, VR HMD for professional applications. Since we're already late with gaming stuff, there are people like HTC and Facebook who we don't want to compete with, then we decided to start with professional markets and later we'll go to adjacent markets. Especially the professional markets, pretty much many companies are already our existing clients. They use our 3D systems, caves, so-called caves, already. And the next step from caves to them is VR or VR HMDs. That's it, that we're feeling about my products.
I want to ask you, as I introduce myself, I'm Archie Kubachis, I represent here American University of Humanity.
Sorry,
I cannot hear it, maybe. But it's not going to go anywhere.
My name is Archie Kubachis, I represent here the PH International.
Maybe you can come here and talk in the microphone.
Yeah, it's a bit better, so
yeah.
everyone can hear.
My name is Archie Kubachis, I represent here two American institutions, PH International, this is a big non-profit institution. PH International, big non-profit institution, and also the American University for Humanities. I'm a professor of this university teaching accounting. My question is that the developed economy, right? Georgia is the developing economy, this transition period. And we have here the different opportunities compared to Silicon Valley, because Silicon Valley had very huge opportunities in the field of innovation, in the field of business, in the field of everything. And we have here very small opportunities for startups, for business, for management of the innovation process in general. What will be your recommendation based on your presentation? What we must do here in Georgia? How we need to manage the startups in the field of innovation business, and what we need to do in general, how to begin this service.
I'm going to repeat the question because some people might not heard. So the question was that the presentation mostly covered Silicon Valley, and I talked a lot about Silicon Valley, but so the US is developed country and Georgia is developing. So how are we? How do we have to manage startups here in Georgia to make them success? Right? It's a very good question, and I was hoping for the question actually, because there is a lot of misconceptions here in Georgia. I noticed from my experience. There are startups. Startup by definition is that enterprise that can grow fast. Because a lot of people confuse here that they call startup, but it's actually not a startup but a lifestyle business. Nothing wrong with a lifestyle business, nothing wrong with a small or enterprise business, but it's a different model that you have to apply to that. So startup is an organization that is designed to grow. Now, when you have a small market, it's very tough to grow. You can grow, but then you're going to hit the ceiling very fast. So the natural way for Georgian startups is to look at big markets. And big markets, what are the big markets? The US is number one, China, number two. Well, what else? Russia, Turkey, these are the big markets. Well, Russia and Turkey, I would argue, but the US and China, the two big markets that startups have to look. Now, it doesn't mean that they have no chance. The startup is designed to grow, but it doesn't have to grow from the beginning. Typically, startup doesn't grow until they find the business model, the right product. So then it starts growing. So here in Georgia, it's a perfect field for testing, for proof of concept. So when startup makes a proof of concept, it shows that it can grow Georgia, then it has to go and conquer other markets. That's if you look at Estonia, for example, Skype, same story, right? Skype started in Estonia, but Skype is a global company that works worldwide. So this is something that people have to realize here, that we cannot be inward looking. We have to look outside. We have to be global from the beginning, because that's the definition of startup. If we want to do startups, if not, it's perfectly fine, but it's totally different model for a lifestyle business.
So unless you go very big population, we can use Georgia as a platform.
As a platform, right? As a proof.
The other level, right?
Exactly.
Get more investment and show investors that our idea works.
Exactly.
If someone is really paying money,
right,
and it can go to other countries.
Typically there are several layers of investment you need for startups, right? The first one is microseed. You can get here microseed investment. The microseed consists from the friends family pools, FFF, or your own savings, or accelerators, right, into incubators, and that is typically used to prove the point, to prove that you have something that customer will love, and hopefully that this is going to be a big market, and then you're going to conquer the big market. The next one is a seed stage funding. Now, for seed stage funding, you need to prove to angels or venture capitalists that your company will be a good bet. You don't have to prove them that you will succeed, because no one can prove them that not Airbnb, nor Facebook, nor Google prove them that they will succeed. So you need just to show them that you're going to be a good bet. In order to show them that you're going to be a good bet, you can use what you achieved in Georgia, and that will be a proof. And then you can translate this to the worldwide growth. That's a formula.
Hi, I'll speak. So my name is Yoon, and Nana and I work at the U.S. Embassy. I just want to, first of all, we've purchased some of the 3D doodlers at our American customers right here. Yeah,
we didn't know that it was yours. Invention.
I mean, it's not like mine. I'm just one of the participants there. But
yeah, it's great. That's really fun.
But please, customer complaints next time.
I know the problem.
I think what you're saying about startups needing to look at a bigger market outside of Georgia is spot on. But when you're talking about the micro seed, friends, families, once you get to the seed level, is there funding? Are there investors that have that long-term outlook here in Georgia, or do you have to, like our friend Lasha, have to look outside Georgia as well for the funding at the seed level?
It's a very good question. So I'm actually 2 questions at top, 3 questions. Well, the first one was about me, but 2 questions were top. Unfortunately, no. So we don't have to answer your questions. We don't have seed funds, even seed funds. I'm not even talking about even angel investors with a outlook, with a global outlook. I mean, even if you look at the global market, at VC companies, for example, there are only 3% of VC firms, they make 90% of income that VC firms make. So even there are a lot of inefficiencies. They're competing very hard for top startups. Now, to expect that here in Georgia there will be a VC fund or angel investor, worldwide level angel investor, I think it will take a long time. So I think the answer is that when you need to, it's okay to use here, you can find micro seed financing, even seed financing from an angel that is not going to participate or contribute something to your company, right? Passive investment. But then, if you want to look for a VC fund or an angel that is going to actually bring something more than the money to your company, then you have to look outside, and you have to look at Silicon Valley. Not in Berlin or not in England. It's only Silicon Valley that has this type of VC funds.
And how does someone sitting in Kutaisi or even Tbilisi reach that kind of audience?
Well, there are several ways, right? The way that I recommend is to go through the accelerator. It's hard enough to get into accelerators, especially when we're talking about Y Combinator or Techstars or Bolt, top level accelerators. It's hard enough to get there. But once you go there, then you have to move for a certain period of time, for 3 months or 4 months. You have to move to where the accelerator is and kind of be with entrepreneurs, and that's going to be a tremendous learning experience especially for people with no experience. And that will be a pass. If you succeed to go through a Y Combinator, if they give you a microseed money, because they are microseed finance, if they give you, the chances are then everything is up to you. It will be easier than sitting here and bugging VC funds who are not even going to respond. Because there you will find valuable connections. What's the most efficient way to go into VC fund? Not the website, not the letter, cold letter. It's BS. They're not going to reply. The most efficient way, if someone makes a recommendation, and someone is either a founder who already this VC invested into, or Y Combinator, which has a tremendous authority there because they prove that they know how to invest in the small companies. Look at their portfolio, Pinterest and Dropbox and Airbnb. They know how to invest at a small level. So the best way, again, find the top accelerator, try to get in there, and then that will be your beginning.
Oh.
And one more thing I remember, there is a pre-accelerator here, actually, it was created by Lasha, Zoom Out. Yeah, the mission of this pre-accelerator to prepare Georgian entrepreneurs to get into accelerators because it's tough. So I think we'll have some people who are working in that direction, which is nice. Yes, Nick? Because
thank you, Mr. Dov, for useful information. My question is that you mentioned, for example, if I want to patent my startup, I must it costs $50,000 or more? It depends on what, why 50,000 or more?
The question was if I want to patent my start. I think there was a mistake. You don't patent your startup, you patent your technology. So if you want to patent your technology or business process or whatever, 50,000+, and I give it just a ballpark number because this includes the whole process. The process is like the first one is the cheapest one. Provisional patent is basically the way to put, like when you are gold, like in Alaska, like you put there, this is mine, right? So you put there and you have 1 year to decide whether you want to move forward or whether you want to change some things. When you file the patent, the non-provisional patent, after that, then the time goes back. So your patent starts from back 1 year ago. Now, 50,000+ is a total cost, and that that includes a lot of lawyer fees, and there will be questions and answers back and forth between USPTO and you, and some other fees. Your patent typically, then you do, the patent goes to different countries, and you pick which countries you go, so it can accelerate pretty fast. From what I know about your startup, you don't worry about patenting because your ideas are not patentable yet. It's not. It's Amazon already patented whatever they did. They shouldn't have patented. It's a one-button thing. Did I answer?
Does the universities help you with the patent?
Yes.
Not only maybe TCO, but is there the same thing in other universities if you know?
Let's talk about India first. Okay. Our tech transfer office was founded by CRDF, GRDF, right? Unfortunately, there was one condition. They gave us money, but we could only help biotech companies. So the answer is yes, we can help biotech companies to get patent, US patent or worldwide patent, but only in biotech field. I hope that's going to change because the grant from GRDF it expires, I think, in a couple of months, and then Ilia State is supposed to pick it up. So now Ilia State is going to be sponsoring it. I don't think they're going to restrict it to biotech because I don't see Georgia as a place for. Some people think that the biotech is developed here. I just don't see it. I think we shouldn't restrict ourselves with just biotech. We shouldn't restrict ourselves with anything. We just need first success story. Whatever. So yes, the answer is that ours will be helping with patent costs. I'm not sure about other tech transfer offices. I don't even know if they exist. I've heard about one in Georgian Technical University, but I'm not aware how to work.
So, in this TCO, Tech Commercialization Office, so how many, just a question for my interest, how many people, what's the percentage of people that come here? Mostly are they professors or the students come as well?
I would say it's 60% students and 40% professors.
So students are more engaged.
Right. Especially now when university did a very good move, they are creating the Zoom Out. Largest pre-accelerator is tied to Technology Commercialization Office. Because if you remember from my presentation, you need an incubation process for that. Because in Georgia we have a tendency that a lot of technologies are, for example, we failed to find the technology that we could help to patent. We had calls, we extended calls, but we couldn't find the technology. So there are a lot of raw technologies that need help.
And so, if I'm right, and please correct me if I'm wrong, so in startup, this is not only that you have an idea and boom, and the world goes down, right? So you have to go several stages and phases. That is, unless you are Elon Musk or some kind of very cool guy, you just have a writer, Steve Jobs. There is, so you were saying that pre-acceleration incubation period is really important for not only for running IP, but if you're not following that direction, but you want to go worldwide and have a real startup, then in that case as well, because it will help you with connections with other seed accelerators that will help you probably get you some investment, right?
Right.
So this is not only ecosystem, doesn't comprise only this government in Georgia and your idea. There is a huge.
Exactly. You are exactly on point. Unless you are Elon Musk or Zuckerberg, who can go to venture capitalists and you know, tell them some bullshit that they're going to still write a check without even asking them to approve. You, especially as a beginner, if you haven't done yet anything in your life, then the first thing that you need to show to people that you created something that your customers, that first of all you have your customers, and this, you created something that your customers will love. Not like, they love it. And love it, there is a big difference between love and like. Here in this sense that they're going to forgive you all the bugs that you're going to have in your product, right? So they're going to still use it and, you know, help you and then help you create the first product. So this is possible to do by yourself. You know, you can do it if you know the problem well and you are good with technology, which is typically that's what you need, you can do it. But then there comes a stage of financing, then you need to be able to reach the VCs, right? And that's why you need to go to pre-accelerator, even if you don't get anything in terms of creating the product and finding your customers. It's still a good idea to go through it just to get connections.
Yeah, especially in Georgia, what's my experience is that there may be some successful guys even who are in management position or top positions in big corporations, and they think they know how to operate, but what I think is they have experience on very bureaucratic, huge organizations, and they will still benefit a lot from pre-acceleration and incubation. So basically, TCO we can see the incubator for IP, intellectual property patent, right?
Yeah.
So, do you agree with the idea that even if you, especially for the corporate workers, it's more necessary to go to this stage? So you have to know some specific startup things that are necessary to do for your success.
Especially for people who are used to corporate life, because the life in corporation and startup is very different. You know?
Yeah.
The speed, you know, the first it's like 1,000 times faster you need to operate in a startup. So especially for them, it makes sense to go to the acceleration, because I was talking, you know, into a previous question, I discussed this the founder who already knows what he's doing. He found his customers and he knows how to do the product that they love. And even he or she is better that he goes to a startup, to accelerator. But, you know, the corporate world, I think it's a must.
Yes, because I know several guys, not several, but a lot of guys that are in corporate infrastructure and ecosystem, and they think that they can just, it's very easy. Like if they can operate on a very big level, they can do startups as well, but usually it's not the case. You are more, your probability is higher that you will fail if you go directly without any knowledge and without any expertise. If you have any numbers for TCO, how many patents have we done this year hopefully, or
Zero.
Zero.
Yeah, that's why. I mean, we had money from GRDF to fund 3 startups with you know, for the RP, and we couldn't find. That's unfortunate thing. There is a lot of the technology is not mature. You know, people don't know you know, they don't operate on a global level. They're very focused on a local level, and we cannot find. You know, we cannot give them money for IP because it's not help. It's just going to be a waste of money.
But if you were not restricted to biotech, do you think the story would be different?
Oh, I hope so. But even then, I think it will be very tough, you know, to find a startup. Unfortunately, we are in a situation where a lot of startups are, you know, well, first of all, it will be tough for us because we have this money for IP, right? You know, the other paths going through pre-acceleration, I think we already found a couple of companies that are going through the accelerator, but not the companies that have IP. Not all companies, all startups have IP, right?
Right.
You know, IP is not, you know, you have to have pretty complicated technology. So I think in IP-wise, it's very tough.
For example, I have the idea, a very interesting idea. For example, new hammer.
New what?
New hammer. Jumbo. Okay. New hammer, which is very useful on the reconstruction field. You see, and I want to create a new startup, innovation startup based on this idea. I come into you, to your office, and I'm telling you, let's begin to create the startup. what can you offer me? How you can help me to create this business?
Well, as I described in the presentation, there will be a process. The process will consist of the assessment part. So we will have to assess the market, whether there is a market big enough for that to justify creation of startup, whether the team is right. If there is no team, then we will have to think about how to put together. One person is usually not a good, the time when we had like single inventors has gone, so we need teams. So after we do this assessment, then we're gonna come to you and tell you what path better to take. The licensing path, if the technology is mature for licensing, then we're gonna take a simple path, right? Find a company who will license it. And then the licensing fees are gonna, they're gonna be run from the product that they create. If not, then we're gonna incubate. Incubate meaning that we're gonna help you to develop.
Yes, have we this kind of institutions here which can make the assessment of this innovation and then licensing of this innovation? Is it possible here?
Yeah, that's a job of technology transfer group, technology commercialization group. The technology commercialization group usually has people who either know a lot about technologies or markets or have connections so that they can ask people. That's why I'm there, because I can pick up the phone and call someone who, the friend of mine who I know that in this industry and talk to him, find out more about whether it's needed or not. So this is the value of tech transfer. And I hope there will be more offices, because I think every university should have it. In Western universities, some universities have several.
Therefore, I think that in conditions of this country, we need to create the environment. You see, environment, I mean the collaboration of the universities, of the companies, of the NGOs, collaboration for the innovation process management. And in this process, where, for example, the whole Georgian universities, 5, 6 big universities which are in this country, they have the contents, they have the memorandums of the understanding, for example, and in this opportunity, they will have opportunity to create the groups, researchers, to create the startups also, you see. But unfortunately, as I know, on present time, we have no this kind of environment here. I know that this kind of environment is on the Silicon Valley. I was there 1 year and I know this. But I'm speaking about the Georgian conditions. See, here we have no this one.
You are completely right. I think we need to create environment. The education should be a big part of it, because we had to do in a tech transfer office. We had to do a lot of lectures.
Also, we have the industrial zones, you see, with good tariff opportunities and tax opportunities. We can make the connection of these industrial zones with universities, with ventures which created in the universities, with teams, with groups, and we can create the consortia which will be a great environment for the startups.
Right.
I mean that my ideas is that to create some environment for which will assist to start innovation startups. See, because
I think every institution has to create this environment, and also JITA, JITA technology, they are also trying to create.
JITA is the first step now, and I'm very glad to see that something is moving here in this field. But out of this, we need to make the accession with universities also.
Correct. Thank you. More questions?
So maybe I will ask a question to Georgi from GITA. You said that here you can use it as a platform. You can have a microfinance or micro-seeding money that you can use to develop your prototype and show other investors that you are really worth. So I know that GITA is trying to create some angel investor network, or maybe you could just say a few words about that, or what other alternatives or what other ideas do you work on to help like startups get seed funding? On the seed funding level.
Another good question.
Because I know that he has something to say.
Thank you for the question. First of all, thank you, David, for amazing presentation and sharing your experience. Access to funding is one of the biggest deals here in Georgia, and our mission, our goal is to create the Angel Club and to increase the level of knowledge of investors in Georgia. This is the long-term plan because it doesn't happen in,
of course.
in 1 or 2 months or even 1 or 2 years. I think the main factor here would be sharing the experience of the foreign investors. The way the investors in the US or in China or in other markets that we have mentioned at once today, how the investors on these markets act, what kind of startups they look for, what kind of risks do they take when investing, and how do they invest in a way not to harm a startup while doing so. This is what Georgian potential investors have to know, and this is, we believe that this is possible through sharing foreign experience. As for how we're going to convince the investors to invest in Georgia is, we believe that one of the good ways of doing so is to create the success stories of the startups and to create a successful example of how a startup started with nothing, then got funded, and then got successful. And then what did the investor get in return, or could have gotten in return if they took equity. So this is why now we are announcing on June 14th, and this is confirmed, and this is why I can say freely, we will announce the startup competition program that will, with which we will invest, the government will invest 100,000 Georgian lari, up to 100,000 Georgian lari into minimum 20 startups, and this will be, and we'll take 5% equity in return, no more, but definitely. And after this program, after 3-4 months from this program, we will take the best startups that participate in this program to Silicon Valley to pitch in front of US VCs. But before doing so, we will bring the very best trainers to train these guys in how to pitch in front of US VCs. This is how we believe that we will create an example of successful Georgian startup, global startup, which is very important. And this is, we believe that this will start the chain of the process, how to attract investors in Georgia and how to create investors from Georgian potential investors, people with capital. Okay. So this is a long-term goal, and we believe that we will achieve this in less than 5 or a bit more than 5 years.
Sorry, I want to add something.
Sure.
For example, it will be very interesting also for any persons to have the opportunity to invest the money, for example, 200, 300 laris in the new Georgian startups, you see. Therefore, maybe we need to write or prepare some templates of contracts or some, some regulations according to which we can put this money in the startup business, in the innovation business. For example, we have no big opportunities, financial opportunities, but people who are here, for example, right today, they now and then they have the $100, $200, $300, and they maybe want to put this money with the government also, with, to put this money in this innovation, in this startup. See, they need to have the opportunity. I mean about the personal, it's the basics of the venture entrepreneurship. See, basics of entrepreneurship, venture entrepreneurship, because the people need to have opportunity to put their money. If we will wait before we will have the strong market institutions to create the ventures and so on, we need around the 15, 16 years. to create this institution in this country. Therefore, we need to change something and to make this experience, which we see in the Silicon Valley, we need to focus for the Georgian conditions to make everything, to make this beginning process here, you see, because here we have no this process right now. Just only first steps. And maybe this is very interesting steps, very nice steps, and I'm very honored and very proud that we are beginning to think about this. But we need also to implement this kind of opportunities, you see, about which I'm speaking.
Sure.
Also, we need to create the quick registrations of the innovations, you see, innovations. Because, for example, in the San Jose State University, where I was Fulbright Scholar 1 year, Business Administration Department, I see there was a room of the commercial department. And all the people who have the new ideas, they can go there and register these ideas. For example, we are not speaking about the technologies. In this case, we are speaking, for example, about the marketing. Somebody have the idea. Therefore, I was speaking about the hammer. You see, also this is a very interesting case. We are not speaking right now about the, for example, great technologies, high tech and so on. We are speaking about the marketing. If you have a new idea, you are going to the office and you are making the registration. In the 5 minutes, you are making this registration, and you can sell these ideas. You see, nobody can use this idea without payment to you.
Without royalties.
Yes. This is very important to have these opportunities here. When you have just a second. When you have the startup, here, you need to have the opportunity to call for finance opportunities out of the state also. You see, if the state is make for you promotion, it's very nice, very good. Bravo to the state, which made the promotion for the startups, innovation startups. But also we need the opportunity to find the financial resources from the personal, private opportunities.
I see. Well, thank you very much for the initiative that you just proposed for like a crowdsourced fund that would fund startups. About the second topic that you mentioned, I think Mr. David is the one.
Yeah, I just want to say very good ideas. The crowdsourcing that Georgi mentioned, there was a Jobs Act in the United States just a couple of years ago, I think. And the Jobs Act, the goal of the job, I think it's not because of Steve Jobs, it's a jumpstart business something. And the goal of this was to allow individuals to invest in startups, exactly your idea, right? But I don't think we can expect from a government or from a big organization that. I'm pretty sure, I already know a couple of people here, locally Georgians, who are working on the platform. This will be the same platform, a similar platform to Kickstarter or the crowdsourcing platforms, because it's relatively easy to implement. This will allow you and other people to invest in a startup that you like. But I think it's just a matter of time, and this startup, the platforms like this will appear. Same with registering your idea. I think there are already the websites where you can register your idea. Not Georgians, but Georgians, you know that we're good at copying the stuff that already exists, so I think it will appear.
I'm thinking, therefore, that we need in Georgian office to make a quick registration.
Right. But it's startup that has to create it, not government.
We have no financial opportunities for registration in San Jose State University because this is very expensive. But we need to make the cheap registration here to begin this process, you see, to begin the movement of this process.
Right.
And after that, then we can find the opportunities to make the registrations in the foreign countries and international know-hows and so on. It's very important to begin. For this beginning, we need the local domestic market of the domestic market of the intellectual property. We need the institutions who will define the intellectual property in the Georgia, and intellectual property in whole field of arts, in field of technology, in field of anyone.
I don't think we have to invent the bicycle here. The definition exists.
Yes.
We don't need to find it.
I want to say that this market is not working good. just only. Because this is the, I know you're absolutely correct that this is a basics, but we need to implement more regulations in the field of intellectual property here, particularly in Georgia.
So, yeah, I just want to add to Georgi had an excellent point. He raised an excellent, he raised an excellent point. He mentioned that GITA is working on an angel network and finance fund, right? And he also mentioned a very important thing, that they're going to bring people who are going to train startups how to fundraise, right? That's very important, because you need to understand the mentality of people who are you approaching, the mentalities of VCs. And just in a nutshell, to give you an idea, the venture capitalists are, they're smart people. Not all of them are smart, but their goal is on one side they are afraid to put money because they're afraid that you're going to go bust, right? You're going to go bankrupt. On the other side, they're afraid not to put money because they might turn out to be a success, right? So they're always hesitating between these two extremes. Their most optimal strategy is to wait. So wait until you show some sign that you are moving to the right direction. Now, also, waiting can be dangerous, right? Someone else might already invest when the startup looks to be hot. But you have to know one thing, that investors, what they're telling you and what they're really telling you are two different things. That's why within training, Georgian startups need to realize this, their speak, so to say, because that can be a source of frustration. Because they can be telling you that, okay, you're going to get money in 2 weeks, but you're not going to get money in 2 weeks. So you need to know what they're telling you. That's why it's very important that you are bringing specialists to train Georgian startups.
Okay.
Telling from our experience, raising money.
Right. We can take a 5-minute break and then start the workshop.